and welcome to our podcast that we are calling Using the Positive Form. This is an interesting thing to consider when writing in order to better communicate our message. So let's go ahead and see what we're talking about. First off, go ahead and go back to our look at the rhetorical triangle. We talk about how all 3 points and all 3 sides of the rhetorical situation need to be working in harmony in order for clear communication to be achieved. We need the speaker to be aligned with audience and with the subject, using purpose, tone, and medium appropriately in order to clearly communicate a message. If any one of those 6 parts doesn't really work, then there's the potential that communication isn't achieved. And again, think about somebody telling a joke where the other person doesn't have the background knowledge for it. The speaker thinks they're going to communicate a funny joke, but the audience misses the point because they lack some element of the joke. And then the rhetorical triangle has broken down. So if our goal is always to communicate as clearly as possible, we want to advocate for the idea of writing in the positive form to help that process along. So first off, what's the difference between these 2 statements? Assert yourself, or don't hide your light under a bush. Okay, that's one pair. The other pair is be positive, or don't be negative. In essence, the ones that are written in the positive form, that are actually giving advice in a positive way, seem inspirational. But when you read things that are written in the negative form, they seem a little nagging and whiny. I'd like you to be positive. That seems inspirational. I don't want you to not be negative. Well, that seems a little wordy and seems a little confusing. So we're going to be talking about writing in the positive form, where things are written much more clearly, concisely, and in effect, more effectively. So oftentimes, sentences get a little bit cluttered when we structure them with the word not in them. So for example, she was not what you would call neat, or she was a slob. Which one is more clear? Which one is more concise, and therefore which one communicates more clearly? Obviously the second one. We're just calling it what it is. She was a slob. We are not trying to dance around what we're trying to say. She was not what you would call neat. So try to hedge our answer. It's much better communication to just say what you mean. Down at the bottom, we are not amused. No. Why don't we just say, we are bored? Or in the case of the gymnast, we are upset. Just say it. Rather than saying what we are not, say what we are. It's more clear and more concise, and that leads to more effective communication. So the general rule in terms of using a positive form is to do that. Use a positive form rather than something that is in the negative form, an un, or a non, or a not scenario. Call someone false. Call someone deceitful. Don't call them untrustworthy. Just call them what they are. Don't call them what they are not. Call it boring rather than not amusing. Again, call it what it is rather than what it is not. And the reason is, if you call it what it is boring rather than not amusing. We definitely know what it is. It is boring. But when you say it in the negative form, you are only saying what you know it is not. Meaning, there are a ton of other things that it could be. Okay, it's not amusing. Well, is it inspiring? Is it funny? Is it ridiculous? Is it hypothetical? The only thing we know for sure in a negative scenario is the one thing that it is not. Therefore, that structure ends up being very vague. Let's go ahead and be much more specific by writing it in the positive form. Call it what it is rather than what it is not. So here's some practice sentences. These are written in the negative form. Can you stop the podcast, consider how they are written, consider a replacement, and write them in a more positive form? And since in writing there are infinite ways to rewrite sentences, here are some potential improvements. For number 1, disorganization reigned in Johnny's habits. We don't have to worry about what he isn't, because we've just told you what he is, disorganized. Sally's efforts lacked focus. Again, not what they didn't have, but we're just telling you exactly what she lacked. Jane zoned out during the lecture. Not what she didn't do, we're telling you what she did do. She dreaded spending the weekend with her mother-in-law. Not what she was not looking forward to, because there could be a bazillion things that she was actually looking forward to, Well, we're just going to go ahead and tell you what it is. She dreaded spending the weekend. Here's some more practice. See if you can change these negatively structured phrases into positively structured phrases. And so that's about it for using the positive form. Take this small detail of writing and see if you can infuse it into your own. Now, this probably doesn't come in the drafting stage because at that stage, we're just trying to get ideas down, check for overall organization, and try to see if our basic structure is clear. But then when we start to go back and refine our writing, see if we can make sure that our writing is more positive in nature rather than negative. Again, it's more clear, it's more succinct, and it's to the point because we are saying what things are as opposed to what things are not. And when we say what things are not, it opens up a whole Pandora's box of things that they potentially could be. So why bother with that amount of vague writing? Get right to the point. What is it? Write it in the positive form rather than the negative. As always, thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, go ahead and bring those into class and we'll get those answered for you. Otherwise, thanks, and we'll see you soon.